So the topic, if you saw the flyer perhaps, is Teshuva and Kappara, insights into the Yom Kippur Haftorah. And so we'll explore those two realms, Teshuva and Kappara, and how they interact or maybe don't interact. So we start with the Gemara in Megillah on 31a. It says, on Yom Kippur we read Acharei Mos, which describes the avoda of the Kohen Gadol. Maftirin Kiko Amar Ram V'Nisa, and we read the Haftorah, which is a chunk from Yeshayahu. Now, Rashi there describes and says, Amar Solo Solo. The beginning of the Haftorah starts with those words, Solo Solo, set out a path. And he says, Shemedaber b'midas haTeshuva. The reason we're reading it is because it speaks about Teshuva, and that makes sense. It's Yom Kippur, we want to do Teshuva, so we're going to have a Haftorah that talks about Teshuva. The problem is, if I look through the Haftorah, it sounds pretty clear, just reading it. It's a rebuke from the Navi. So obviously it's talking about Teshuva. And one question that kind of comes up within Rashi is, why does he even need to tell me that it's about Teshuva? It's a little strange. What is he coming to preclude? If we also take a look at Tosfos, he describes our custom of which Haftorahs we read for the various holidays. And he describes this whole Tekufa that we've been in for the past, 2 months now. He says, we have the custom al pia Pesikta, Lamar Gimel de Piraniosa, Kodem Tisha B'Av. We have 3 Haftorahs that talk about Piranios, about bad tidings before Tisha B'Av, and they list them off. And then after Tisha B'Av, we have the 7 of Nechama. And then after that, we have 2 that deal with Teshuva. And what are those 2 that he lists? Dirshu, which we just heard, if you were just in Mincha, or earlier today you heard, and Shuva, which we're going to read on Shabbos. Shabbos Shuva. He left out our Haftorah for Yom Kippur, though. Or they left out. So it's a little strange. If it's talking about Teshuva, why isn't it in the list of Haftorahs of Teshuva? So it sounds, by virtue of the fact that Tosfos left it out, that it's not actually about Teshuva. And that's where we get this kind of tension. Is it about Teshuva or an alternative? And we're not even clear right now what that alternative would be. I meant to mention at the beginning, obviously this is based primarily on Rav Aharon's Torah, but there's a little bit from his son Rav Moshe. And this question that we started with is from Rav Moshe, but part of his answer, I think, is predicated specifically on Rav Aharon's Torah.
Just to clarify, which Haftorah are we talking about now?
For
the one that's not in the list.
Sorry. For Yom Kippur morning.
Which is what's the Haftorah?
Kiko Amar Ram V'Nisa.
Okay.
Is that Yeshayahu?
Yeah, it's Yeshayahu 57:14 to 58:14. If that helps you.
The very Davar, right? The Sochitz on the very Davar.
It's at the end. Yeah. But the real focus in the middle, at least, is it talks about mitzvos bein adam lechavero, saying, do I really worry about your fast so much? Go out and clothed naked, etc., etc. That will come up in a minute. So Rav Moshe suggests a very simple answer before going into a more complicated answer. He says Tosfos is referring to, in his list, the category of thematic haftorahs versus haftorahs that are centered around the moadim, which Yom Kippur is a moed, and therefore its haftorah is in a separate list. And the list that he gave us for Teshuva are not tied necessarily to a specific moed, they're thematically based. That's an interesting answer, but he develops another one, and he says, maybe it's talking about Kappara. Now, how he gets that is not so clear necessarily. It's talking about Teshuva, and that seems to be the most immediate thing. And so as he explores that, he talks about, in our mind, do you think Teshuva and Kappara are related? I would say yes. You do Teshuva, and then, God willing, you get a Kappara. It seems to follow. It's a domino effect, if you will. But he says that's not really true. It's not always true, at least. In Gemara Yuma, we have Rabbi Yehuda Nasi who says it's possible Yom Kippur is mechaper even without Teshuva. So you have Kappara without Teshuva. And so, too, the vidoy that the Kohen Gadol reads that we see in the davening on Yom Kippur, he's saying vidoy for people that aren't there, for his household, for Klal Yisroel, and presumably that's bringing about a Kappara, but there's nothing being said about them having done Teshuva. He's reading the vidoy, not anybody else. On the flip side, we also have Teshuva without Kappara. If you do an Aveir, you would be Chayav Misa or Chayav Kares, God forbid. We say very clearly that you do Teshuva, but the Kappara is Tole ad Yom Miso. You don't get a true Kappara until you're Nifter. And so we see that there, in a certain sense, those two can be separated. Teshuva and Kappara can be separate and distinct, even though we often view them as linked. And really, he seems to say at the end that let's just stick with them being linked, because the Rambam in Hilchos Teshuva says, Yom Kippurim hu zman Teshuva. So we have Teshuva. L'chol yachud l'rabim, hu kates mechila uslicha l'Yisroel. It's also the tremendous moment of mechila and slicha for Klal Yisroel. So you have Kappara on the other hand. They're both there, and they're both present. So really what he's trying to do is bring out a tiny, tiny little nakuda in terms of what is our true focus with the Haftorah. Not to say that Teshuva and Kappara aren't both present. They are. But what is our focus? And again, he seems to say that Kappara is. And he acknowledges that this is all kind of based on an external analysis. If you go and look at the words, it's going to be hard to draw this out. We have to look at thematic ideas. And he says, again, that the Haftorah brings a heavy emphasis on mitzvahs bein adam lechaveru. And what happens when we stop observing mitzvahs bein adam lechaveru? Or really not what happens, but what brings that about? He says fundamentally it's self-centeredness. I'm worried about myself, my own life, my own family, my own job, my own troubles, my own pain. And that really is the exact opposite of what we need to be to attain a Kappara. I've turned myself into the center of my universe. And I've forgotten about Hashem. I've forgotten about the other, my fellow. And so the Navi now is calling out to us and saying, reattune yourself. Go out into the street, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, do what you need to do, take care of other people. Remember, recognize the fact that you're not the only person in the world. And therefore, he calls it a madrich, the Kappara. It's helped guiding us to Kappara. Because doing the tshuva on its own might not necessarily get us to Kappara. You really have to go out and demonstrate to me that you've done the tshuva by helping others. You have to take the next step. And so it's interesting, and he ties that back into Rashi and Tosfos, how they're kind of bringing out separate elements within the tshuva, the Haftorah, excuse me. I thought that was a very interesting idea, and it reminded me of an idea from Rav Aharon that was from a sikha that he gave in Tishrei in 1987 I think it was in Grus. And he breaks down tshuva itself into two separate categories, or two different themes. He says, on one hand, we have tshuva, which is return from something, meaning really from sin most prominently. Shuvu medarchechem araim, return from your bad ways. It's almost, when I first saw that idea, it almost sounded like being a vagabond, and being like a rolling stone. You're leaving, I'm roaming. I don't really even know where I'm going. All I know is I'm focused on not being here. I'm just going. It's a little overdramatic, the way I'm expressing it, but the point remains the same, that the focus is on leaving where you were prior. The other side to tshuva is return to something or someone, especially that someone with a capital S, Hashem. He says, Shuva Yisroel ad Hashem Elokecha, the opening words of the Haftorah for Shabbos Shuva, that we're returning to Hashem. In Shuva alai v'ashuva aleichem, return to me, Hashem says. Return to Hashem, and He'll return to us as well. Here, the focus is more prospective. It's where are we going? Where are we trying to get to? We're trying to return to Hashem. And we're not focused necessarily on the past. We're not burdened by what we've done in the past. We've kind of left that behind. We've gone past that. And I think that, especially for us, can be very powerful. It's easy to get caught up in what we want to change and what we've done in the past. But where do we want to go in life? Where, especially in this tekufa, when you're in university, that's your whole thing right now, is where are we trying to go in life? I remember that when I was in university, my major was in music. And so that doesn't lend itself to where you're going in life, necessarily. I still got somewhere. I'm still going, God willing, thank God. A little less of music nowadays, though. And it's interesting, he points out that this form of tshuva, where we're talking about going to somewhere, or to a place, to a goal, that can exist even without sin. You still have to have something that you're leaving behind, obviously. But it can be brought about more by lacking, a sense of, I want something more out of life. I want something more out of the way that I'm acting. And he says, what if it's not really tied to a sin necessarily. What are we dealing with? What's bringing it about? And he ties it into shichacha, to forgetting. And then he goes through various different levels of that, but since we're short on time, I'm just going to jump to the level that he focuses on the most. It's not that you're completely unaware of Hashem or that you've forgotten completely. It's that you've lost a sense of direction. You've kind of focused on yourself, or we've become self-centered. And he quotes, Rav Aaron quotes a smog, which has a very interesting story. It's Sefer Mitzvos Gedolos, which was brought about by a dream. He notes in the introduction to the Sefer that I had a dream, and I was told by this dream that you should go write a Sefer describing all the mitzvos in the Torah and break it into two sections. You have the mitzvos aseh and the mitzvos lo taseh. So he went and did it, which is nice. I don't think I've ever acted on a dream, and certainly not written a Sefer about mitzvos based on a dream. But he went and did it. And so he describes, right before I was about to release the section on mitzvos lo taseh, I had another dream. And the dream told me, you did a very nice job with the Sefer, but you forgot one big part. Hine shechachta es ha'ikar, he wrote. You forgot the whole point. You had every mitzvah, you'd done everything, literally everything. But you forgot the whole point, which is, Hishamer lecha pen tishchach es Hashem. Guard yourself lest you forget Hashem. You want to have that consciousness of Hashem. And it's wild that he's writing this whole Sefer and he's describing himself as having forgotten the Ikar. And I think we can really apply that to our own lives, where we have so much, we're learning, we're coming to a Chabur, we just went to Mincha, we do so much with our lives. I'm sitting in morning Seder every morning, thank God. And yet it's so easy to forget. Like, you didn't even think about this pasuk. Hishamar lecha pen tishchach es Hashem. It's very powerful, and especially in light of the two ideas within Teshuva, that it's not just about what am I leaving behind, but where am I going? In order to know where I'm going, I have to remember. I have to know what it is I'm going to, and that's to Hashem. And I would kind of leave you with that question of where am I going, not just in life in terms of what we're studying in university, but really in terms of who you are as a person and where you want to be, where you want to grow in this coming year, and what you want to accomplish. It's a beautiful chevra that we have here, and I know people from this chevra that come in and learn at the Vayukolo with Rabbi Greenberg, and it's a tremendous opportunity that we all have to learn from one another and learn from the leaders in the community. And I know Rabbi Greenberg is here and he's available for you, so take advantage of that. And God willing, that's something that we should all have the merit to achieve, of trying to decide and figure out where are we going in this next year. And especially when you look at that opening line, I'll just read it in the original Hebrew, the opening line of the Haftorah. V'amar solu panu darach harimu michsho mederach ami. As Rabbi Sachs translates, he says, lay a road here. Lift out of my people's way all that could make them fall. And there are different languages there, and you can see in the Mefarshim, especially the Malbim, he goes through and he's very nitpicky with what each word means because there are different connotations to each of them. But the focus here is there's a path, and we need to know where that path is in front of us. And also keep in mind where you've been as well. That's very significant. But we need to know where we're going. Everyone should have a beautiful new year. And I think it's time for Marv.
Sure.